Welcome back to AM Agenda and our panel, Scott Morrison and Jason Clare. The government's announced a back down on its youth allowance plans after months and months of campaigning from student groups and others in regional areas. Jason Clare, I want to get your thoughts on this. It does seem that the government has finally admitted it got it wrong when it comes to the treatment of students on so-called gap years, where they work for a year to prove themselves independent of their parents when it comes to income tests. The government it seems, has recognised that it was going to be to the detriment of those students. It's changes to youth allowance.
Yeah, this is big reform to student services and student allowances. It's the biggest reform in 20 years. What the Bradley Review showed is that there are a lot of students that are quite well off that were getting access to youth allowance, and then a lot of students from regional areas or from more disadvantaged backgrounds who weren't getting access to youth allowance. And these big reforms are about making sure we put the money where it's needed most. And I think that most people in this debate, when looking at it, when comparing the old system with the new system that we're setting up, would say that the new system is better targeted and is going to help to make sure we deliver youth allowance to those that need it most. In the middle there, in the transition between the old system and the new system, there's some people who elected to do a gap year this year that would be disadvantaged. It's been recognised, and these changes are designed to fix that before the legislation's even introduced into Parliament.
So a backflip. It's a backflip.
No, well, I think it's listening. Governments have got a job to lead, but also to listen. And this is big reform, enormous reform, the sort of thing that hasn't happened in 20 years. It's all part of what the government's doing to make sure that education, and in particular higher education, is available to people in regional areas. And fewer people from regional areas got access to university over the last 12 years. And more people from disadvantaged backgrounds, places like I represent in Western Sydney. All the data shows that there's a lack of representation in university from people from disadvantaged backgrounds. I want more people that grow up in places like Bankstown and Cabramatta and Western Sydney to get access to university. And by better targeting youth allowance to people like that and people from regional Australia, we'll make sure there's better representation at university, more people getting qualifications and a stronger economy as a result.
Scott, do you welcome this compromise from the government?
Well, we remain to be convinced, to be honest. I mean, the Coalition has campaigned incredibly hard on this issue. We've raised the questions in the Parliament, we've made the representations out in the communities and reflected what are genuine concerns of students in rural and regional areas. But the numbers, Kieran, just don't add up. I mean, the government's saying this is going to cost just over $100 million, but the estimates previously are over $500 million. And we're going to look at the detail of this. It's potentially 25,000 plus students who may be missing out here. So we want to see the detail to ensure that there's no three-card trick here from the government.
Okay.
And maybe they need to be listening more.
Okay, on another issue now to finish, the Trade Minister will today launch a $20 million Brand Australia campaign. This, of course, follows the last campaign, the $40 million Where the Bloody Hell Are You campaign.
We've bought you a beer.
And we've had the Camel shampooed.
We've saved you a spot on the beach. And we've got the sharks out of the pool.
We got the roos off the green.
And Bill's on his way down to open the front gate.
Your taxi's waiting. And dinner's about to be served.
We've turned on the lights.
And we've been rehearsing for over 40,000 years.
So where the bloody hell are you?
Scott Morrison, you were involved in that strategy. It's been described by the Prime Minister as a rolled gold disaster. Was it a disaster?
Well, no. It increased expenditure on tourism into Australia by $4 billion a year. And there has been another campaign since then, and that was the one linked to the Australia movie, which the government was actually the one that got behind. So I think, if anything, it proves that this is a pretty vexed area. Now, one of the issues I think here is that you've got to decide what your campaign's for. Our campaign with that campaign was all about increasing expenditure and just not increasing visitor numbers. And we knew that deliberately. So while visitor numbers remained flat, expenditure actually went up. But the problem, I suppose, that the government now is going to face, which all people trying to do this task face, is getting domestic acceptance for these things. How people perceive us is often different about how we want to be perceived. And at the end of the day, if you're involved in selling things and marketing things, you need to appeal to people's positive perceptions about Australia.
You know that New Zealand did it very successfully with a 100% pure campaign. South Africa, India, Korea, these are other countries that have these brand councils already. Is this something that is long overdue?
Well, that's not quite true. I mean, I was involved in the New Zealand one as well, and the same advertising agency that came up with 100% pure New Zealand is exactly the same one Tourism Australia I used to come up with the Bloody Hell campaign. So this is the same thinking, and it was all based on one thing in Australia, and that was that people overseas value our lifestyle, they value the personality of the Australian people, and they just are in awe of the Australian landscape and environment. These are our great assets, and so it's a tough gig, but I would encourage Australians to get behind something like this, but to understand that it's got to appeal quite broadly, and it's got to speak to people overseas about where they're at with Australia and what they feel is positive about Australia.
But these brand campaigns, these brand councils are used by others, South Africa, as I say, India, to great effect. Is this a long overdue in terms of its holistic approach? Is Simon Crean talking about using this to market Australian products and services as well?
I think there is merit in it, and I think going back many years, I mean, Ireland did it quite successfully. Now, Ireland's fallen on tougher times now, but they used this and they took it right across the government. But that's where the trick is in implementing something like this. It's also, this thing always quickly descends into some sort of culture wars debate, and I would suggest to the latte set to sort of stay at arm's length from the debate. This is about a commercial agenda, and the commercial agenda is about Australian jobs. And so let's not turn this into some sort of obsessive navel-gazing exercise.
It is important, Jason, isn't it, in terms of getting this right? It's an expensive campaign, the spend on marketing, and it does have implications, as Scott quite rightly points out, for one of our biggest industries.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Scott has made some really constructive points just there. He's got more expertise in this area than most. He makes the point that we've got to focus on the economy and creating jobs. 1 in 5 jobs in Australia depends on exports. It's a growing area of the Australian economy. I'm thinking not just about coal or iron ore, but business services and financial services. They account at the moment for something like $50 billion worth of exports every year, and it's growing exponentially. We need to leverage that. There's a really good reason why we just took a TV ad break, and that's because businesses know that when they advertise themselves and promote themselves, promotes their business, and it helps to create jobs and create and make money for that business. Now, that's the challenge for us here. Now, to promote ourselves, we punch above our weight. We're a small country that does a lot of things very well, and this is about promoting ourselves to the world, not just in terms of being a tourism market, but a place to invest and a place where you can get quality services.
Can I make one more point, Kieran, too? I mean,
yes, Scott, I want to ask you, actually, I mean, and make your point as well, but we're almost out of time, but I want to get your thoughts. If you had a bit of input into this process, as Jason said, you've got a lot of experience in the area, what would be the key aim of this brand campaign as far as you see it?
Well, the point I'd make is that it's not just... Brand campaigns aren't ads. And I think that's the thing people often mistake about them. It's not a tagline, it's not an ad. It's about representing the essence of what your offering is as a country. And that has to flow through every single form of media that you work in, whether it's public relations, whether it's online and digital or advertising or the whole suite of things you do. But it's basically a message. It's a culture that goes right across everything you say and do about Australia overseas. So, look, at the end of the day, I think the strengths of Australia are well known. It's actually how you translate them. And I said it before, the people, the place, and the lifestyle, and how you relate that into all areas of what Australia has to say about their economy and their business and their government. Now, it's how you implement these things that the trick is. And as I say, there's always the problem in this country that you get a lot of people go against these things because they'll have a different view, and there always will be different views on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it will be interesting to see what they come up with. The Trade Minister, Simon Crean, to launch that Brand Australia campaign this morning, pretty much as we speak, in Melbourne, $20 million campaign, and it should be fascinating to see what they eventually come up with. It's going to be launched in February of next year. But for now, Scott Morrison, Jason Clare, as always, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks, Kieran.
That's all.